My name is Thomas Moon, 26 years old. I worked at the Simpson factory before. It's not that I hated my job there. I didn't mind the typical overtime or the chaos caused by part-timers' absences. But there was a reason I couldn't stay at that workplace anymore. That reason was my boss, David Moncton, who had a pretty twisted personality. David's long career has earned him high praise from the top management at the Simpson factory. However, he was often whispered about, hoping he would quit soon due to his attitude. And David, at the age of 35, had become a sort of undercover boss. He, who worked in the same section as me, had graduated from a decent university. Perhaps because of this, he had a high pride and didn't want to do simple tasks that anyone could do. He looks at us as if to say, "I graduated from such a good university," and pushes simple tasks that anyone could do onto us, wanting to play the leader and give instructions on the site. Of course, even though David had a long tenure, there was nobody who wanted him to become the factory manager. When upper management once considered him as a candidate, there was strong opposition from the employees. Eventually, another calm and fair person was appointed as there was significant backlash from the surrounding employees. Additionally, it seems that David had been attending interviews from major corporations in urban areas to small and medium-sized enterprises after graduating from university. But as expected, he wasn't accepted anywhere. As a result, he ended up at Simpson factory in the middle of nowhere. And David looked down on this workplace considerably. Perhaps because of that, he didn't care about receiving criticism from everyone. Or maybe because of that, he seemed quite arrogant about his education from the time he transferred here.
I graduated from Boston University, so my way of thinking is different from yours. Or rather, isn't your way inefficient? Stop doing it that way from now on. Because the methods you low-educated people come up with are inefficient. Follow my way. Look, this way is more efficient, isn't it?
However, the easier way to do the work varies from person to person. If David's way was clearly better, no matter how flawed his personality was, we would follow it. But whether it was his way or the previous way, the time difference was not significant, and David's way was more complicated and prone to mistakes, so we were all at a loss with David, who was overly pushy. Also, he was a person with high pride and a quick temper. If he was even slightly denied the done things he confidently taught.
What? Are you saying that I, a senior and highly educated person, am wrong? Do you think what you guys say is better than my farts?
And since the probability of him getting angry and blowing up was sure, no one dared to point it out. There was no doubt, however, that our avoidance of quarrels encouraged him further. None of us knew how to stop his rampage. So, we had no choice but to simply remain silent and leave him be. Whenever David spoke up, I couldn't help but think that his way of speaking was too much, even though I couldn't respond. It is one of the reasons that I myself am a private university graduate of lower level than the university he graduated from. I believe that my ability to think in terms of work is probably better than his. It's clear as day when you look at the records of how efficiently I finish cleaning and tidying up in the same amount of time. However, I am certainly less educated than him. Maybe that's why David, who places a high value on education, kept looking down on me. I had a bad feeling ever since I was asked about my university name upon joining. And that bad feeling turned out to be spot on. David had been harassing me and the other low-educated guys ever since. It happened when I was working in another section instead of the part-timer who was absent. Since everyone knew the circumstances, Nobody should have said anything even if I was working in a different place than usual. But when David spotted me from afar, he furrowed his brows and came flying over to me.
Hey, you're never in this section, are you? Don't just move around on your own. An incompetent guy like you has no right to arbitrarily change positions and act all high and mighty.
He started picking on me. Well, today, the usual senior part-timer is off. So if I don't take care of this place, it won't function properly. Despite my hurried explanation, such rationality didn't apply to him.
What are you even talking about? Stop acting like you're indispensable to this company. Even if you're not there, someone else can take your place. And if you make decisions without my permission, and something goes wrong later, it'll be a problem. Hey, do you understand what I'm saying?
David was acting like he was right, but whenever one of the part-timers suddenly took a day off, it was always either me or the other part-timer who happened to be off today who ended up covering their position. Even the factory manager knew this, yet David would come at me with complaints, even in places where it wasn't appropriate to do so, just to pick a fight. Then, David let out a deep sigh and said,
You always act selfishly, and it's a problem. The sales of the parts we made have dropped. Maybe it's because someone else made them, and they shipped defective products. This factory is not well checked, and will have shipped even your defective products. Hey, you're the reason for the poor performance these days.
He said nothing but selfish things. I'm usually known to be quick and accurate in my work. Thanks to that, even elderly part-timers have asked me to switch to their section, which requires speed. So, what David was saying made absolutely no sense to me. However, David continued to insist that when someone with low education like me does this task, their result is sloppy and poor quality. Moreover, our performance hadn't actually declined substantially. Due to the recent price hikes, the sales of the machines themselves had dropped, so the proportion of our products in the market hadn't changed much.
What nonsense are you spouting? Look at this. Compare last month's sales with a month before that.
Well, is it because it's not the peak season? Sales usually drop around this time. Of course, there are fluctuations in sales. And it's not the peak season now. It's business as usual, so what is this person even talking about?
The peak season? That's irrelevant. Besides, there's work where there's work. The drop in sales of our products isn't just because of the times. It's because you're doing things on your own. Our client cut us off because our quality has gone down.
He wants to put me down somehow with such an unreasonable reason. However, I thought it wouldn't be wise to argue too much with David, who seemed like he could become even more troublesome if provoked. This harassment was just the beginning.
With this, our performance will improve. After all, you have to earn trust from various places. If you can handle all this work, more orders will come. For those with low education, since they lack intelligence, all they can do is work hard to make up for it. Come on, instead of complaining, keep working harder.
No matter how much we opposed, David's opinion remained unchanged. Due to the increased workload with impossible deadlines, we worked late into the night every day. Faced with tasks that seemed never-ending, both physically and mentally, we were at our limits. However, even a slight delay would result in David's furious outbursts. As a result, we were forced to work like workhorses without being able to rest no matter how exhausted we were. Then, the tasks brought by David started to increase sales little by little. Taking advantage of this, David would report to the higher-ups as if it were my achievement, and the upper management, unaware of the details on the ground, would instruct us to continue in the same vein. And once again, we desperately tried to handle the enormous work he brought in. It became a cycle. Due to the tight deadlines, mistakes and complaints kept increasing rapidly. Yet, despite prioritizing short-term profits, David didn't stop accepting new tasks. It's impossible to continue like this. Everyone felt that their sanity was slipping away. Finally, a major mistake occurred on the production line. As a result, one by one, our long-standing clients, with whom we had built a trusting relationship, terminated their contracts. Simpson Factory, originally renowned for its intricate craftsmanship and diligent work, now faced a crisis. But after David arrived, the advantages of our factory disappeared. At the end of the day, when a serious mistake was discovered, David came to me and said,
"A major defect was found in the parts due to the process where you were present. I've always thought you made a lot of mistakes, but this time, I won't forgive you. You're fired."
However, it was strange that David was in charge of that area only for that day. Yet, it was also a place where I usually did most of the work. No, David was in charge of the area that day. I tried to argue.
"Are you trying to blame your mistakes on me? You were always there, weren't you? Don't talk nonsense."
Just to confirm, I checked the document for that day's assignment, and for some reason, my name was written on it. David was the one managing this document. Well, I quickly realized what David was up to and felt all my strength drain away in an instant. However, I tried confirming with other co-workers whether this injustice was happening to them too, but they were also focused on their own work that they hadn't noticed what was going on around them. Still, I thought it was absurd that I would lose my job over such lies, so I expressed my desire to talk to upper management. However, it seemed they trusted David so much that they ended up believing his excuse about not wanting me to resign to take responsibility for my mistakes.
The upper management already acknowledged that it's your fault. Documents regarding your dismissal have already been prepared. This is already settled. Considering you've ruined our dealings with our valued clients, this is the natural consequence.
No matter how much I argued, David's influence with the upper management remained unchanged. Ultimately, I ended up being forced to quit. On my last day at the office, as I was cleaning up my desk, David looked at me and laughed with genuine delight.
"We have low-educated regular employees like you, so our jobs were often held back by defects. That's why low education is a problem. You can't even handle simple tasks like these properly. You, a useless incompetent, should prepare yourself for a pathetic life that matches your abilities. It was a big mistake to have someone like you in the same company as me. Well, I guess God sees everything. It means you shouldn't be working alongside me as a full-time employee. It's about time you leave. Finally, we're rid of one burden."
No matter how smart he is, it's frustrating to be laughed at by such a vulgar guy. I couldn't help feeling regretful about not studying hard enough in high school, and there's no satisfaction in arguing back with someone who easily gets angry. On the contrary, as I reminded myself that arguing back would only lead to more frustration, I ignored him and stood up with my belongings. Despite David's persistent insults, I returned my uniform and left the locker room without paying him any attention. Over the next few days, I started job hunting. Then, over the course of a week, I sent out resumes to various companies, food companies, clothing companies, and even major advertising agencies. I deliberately didn't limit myself to any particular industry, but I knew I wouldn't choose another factory job. Being still relatively young, I believed I could start over again. Especially with the major advertising agencies offering good salaries and seemingly decent benefits, I secretly hoped for a job that would be less physically demanding than before. Working at the factory required standing for long hours and constantly repeating the same movements while looking down, which caused significant pain in my legs, back, neck, and shoulders. Moreover, there were many tasks involving cleaning and lifting heavy objects, and squatting down was quietly tough. Because of this, I began to feel like maybe the factory wasn't for me anymore. A few days later, to my surprise, I received an email from my top choice major advertising agency informing me that I had passed the initial screening and was being invited for an interview. Yes, all right. Excitedly, I pulled out my suit from the dresser and noticed the presence of a small box hidden in the back. Since I hadn't used it for a long time, I gently took out the small box containing something I had stored away in the depths of the dresser. It was a memento from my older brother, which I had cherished like a protective charm all this time. My brother, who was 9 years older than me, started working when I was still in middle school. Since we didn't have much money, my brother worked part-time to save up for his university tuition. He then went to university on a scholarship. Although my brother was average in academics and sports, he was well liked by both men and women and admired by his friends. My brother was calm for his age, and he had the ability to persuade people. When my brother started working, the watch he inherited from our father, while very old, was actually quite a luxury item. Even though I knew nothing about such things, it had a design that left me awestruck. It was so well cared for without any rust that it didn't look old at all.
It's heartening to wear this watch.
Recalling my brother's gentle smile and calm voice, I fastened the watch around my wrist. My older brother never got angry with me. Even though I was mischievous, he simply offered gentle guidance. He seemed to understand that yelling and shouting were pointless. When my brother scolded me, I found myself less defiant than when my father yelled at me, and I became willing to listen obediently. I think my brother definitely had that kind of power. My brother had become quite a famous person in the university. However, my brother didn't seem to notice that much. He always had that laid-back vibe. He did not show any self-consciousness, which is common among young people, or the attitude of being superior to others and taking a mount. I thought that's probably why everyone liked him so much. As expected of my brother, he always had a steady stream of girlfriends. And although he had talked about getting married after finding a job, he passed away in his first year of employment. It was caused by a sudden heart attack. My brother had the attack while he was asleep and never woke up from it. His girlfriend at the time was the first one to find him, and she was more distraught than anyone at the funeral. She blamed herself for not noticing any signs while they were living together. Her pain must have been beyond imagination. However, all my mom and I could do was reassure her, "It's not your fault." My brother always treasured the watch he wore. For some reason, I felt a profound sense of comfort from the weight of that watch. Just wearing it made me feel like my brother was right there with me. "All right, let's do this." Muttering those words, I pulled out a book I hadn't used in years from the bookshelf, one I had used for job hunting. I earnestly read through the interview preparation book, practicing for the upcoming interview. Before I knew it, the day of the interview had arrived.
Please come in.
Yes, thank you.
I'm the interviewer, John Smith. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Please, have a seat.
The interviewers consisted of two men in their late 30s and a woman slightly younger than them. The female interviewer appeared to be around my age, but she was quite stunning.
Well then, let's begin the interview.
At that moment, the expression on the female interviewer's face changed completely. She widened her eyes in shock and stared intensely at my wrist. What? I tilted my head in confusion.
That watch. That can't be.
She began to tremble uncontrollably, her expression on the verge of tears.
It seems there might be some circumstances. But since he's here for the interview, shall we proceed?
John, with a puzzled look, asked her.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry.
She replied, startled, and looked down. After that, feeling her intense gaze, the interview proceeded smoothly. I was asked typical questions about my work history, job responsibilities, qualifications, and how I envisioned working in the company. I answered them one by one. There weren't any particularly unusual questions, so I felt relieved inside. However, inevitably, they asked about the reason for leaving my previous job. I couldn't honestly disclose the real reason here. I made up something about wanting to challenge myself in this industry or seeking a job where I could grow further. I didn't know how the interviewers perceived my answers. Nevertheless, without any strange expressions, the interview concluded smoothly. "Thank you for taking your time today," I said as I closed the door behind me, exhaling a sigh of relief. I could feel the sweat on my back from the chilly, damp sensation. I have no experience, and my previous job was labor-intensive, so I have no experience with office work. I was actually very anxious about whether they would accept someone like me. I realized that such feelings had somehow surfaced, and I chuckled softly. As I walked down the company's clean, white hallway, I hoped that everything would go well. After buying a drink from the vending machine and preparing to leave the company, I heard the sound of hurried footsteps, and I was stopped with a "wait a moment." When I turned around, there was the female interviewer from earlier, panting and rushing towards me. "Oh yes, what's the matter?"
Well, sorry to bother you suddenly, but that watch, did you perhaps inherit it from someone in your family?
The surprised expression she had when she looked at my wrist earlier. Was it because she recognized this watch? But I was surprised. I couldn't help but be surprised by the old watch that didn't seem like any brand. As I was wondering if she was somehow related to my father or brother, I was left speechless.
I'm sorry. My name is Mia Riley. The watch is the same one that my respected senior used to wear, and he had the same last name as you. So I thought I'd ask just in case.
Indeed, this is a memento from my brother. Do you know my brother, Mia? After I mentioned my brother's name and our hometown, it became clear that she was indeed looking for my brother. I explained to her that my brother was no longer with us and how he entrusted me with this watch, which left her deeply saddened.
Oh, I never imagined he had passed away.
She then told me why she recognized my brother just by this watch. It was a custom-made item that was unique in the world. I had thought the design was unusual, but I didn't know it was that unique, so I was shocked. When I asked Mia about her relationship with my brother, she told me that he was her senior whom she relied on during high school and university club activities. Originally, my brother, who was serious and caring, was quite trusted and respected by both his classmates and juniors. Among them, there was a girl who, although not in love, admired and secretly longed for him. She started playing basketball in high school. However, since there were few students who started from high school, and she joined the basketball club only for the fun of playing, she was actually not good at ball sports. Over time, she began to feel isolated because her skills didn't improve much within the club. Mia started to be ostracized by the strong-minded individuals in the club who always talked behind her back. However, since it was a fact that she was causing trouble for the whole team, she endured without saying anything back. Seeing her attitude, some people bad-mouthing her became more heated. Gradually, all the menial tasks and chores were being dumped on her. However, even though she was treated like that, she couldn't argue back at all because she felt she was only causing trouble during practice and games. My brother was captain of the basketball club at the time. Learning about the situation from other club members, my brother immediately called them out and had a talk with them. As a result, there was no longer any disparity based on skill or treatment like servants. My brother didn't have playing skills, but he had an attractive, calm personality. And when they were seriously advised by him, they couldn't rebel.
I'm always so timid because of my usual self-consciousness. I couldn't say anything to those who bullied me, so I had to endure it. But he told me that it was not right and immediately took action. Without thinking that they might dislike him, he warned them clearly. A lot of people just don't get involved with these troublesome people. But your brother wasn't. So I was able to continue playing basketball despite feeling inferior, without any unpleasant feelings. I don't think I'll ever forget about your brother. But I won't be able to see him anymore, will I? I was hoping that if we ever had the chance to meet again, I could fulfill the promise we made back then.
With tears in her eyes, Mia said. After that, my brother noticed when the atmosphere in the club became tense, when everyone stopped training seriously, or when new harassment seemed about to start. He was always the first to step in whenever Mia was about to be teased again for her clumsiness, skillfully diffusing the situation without angering anyone. Mia, who had often considered quitting the club due to her lack of ability, was able to continue her favorite sport thanks to my brother's presence. I think that's quite a remarkable feat that erases significant regrets in a person's life. Hearing about my brother's actions, I felt even prouder of him. However, I didn't know what to say to the tearful Mia, so I could only remain silent.
I'm sorry. I suddenly said something like this. I'm very sorry about your brother. Would it be okay if I visited your family's home to offer my condolences someday?
Oh, yes, please do. I think my brother would be happy to be mourned by you. With tears still in her eyes, she smiled and said thank you before quickly leaving the scene. Left behind in that moment, I was stunned by the unexpected turn of events. On the way home, memories of my brother flooded back, and I found myself longing to see him desperately. My brother, who often took me outside to play when I was young, always willing to be my playmate. Playing soccer and basketball, splashing around in the river, racing down hills on our bikes. Even though there was an age gap between us, my brother never once seemed bothered by being with me. Reflecting on my own emotional immaturity during adolescence, I realized just how remarkable that was. I miss my brother. Thinking about it made my nose tingle. The sunset felt like it was piercing my eyes. After that, I passed the interview successfully and started working at that advertising agency. It's a completely different job from my previous one, so there's a lot to learn and sometimes it gets confusing, but whenever that happens, me always patiently teaches me. At first, I was just barely keeping up with the daily workload, but now it's my second year at this company. Gradually, I began to see the inefficiencies in this company's operations. I proposed improvements to address those inefficiencies in my second year at the advertising agency. It seems like they're really analyzing and considering my suggestions. Also, they appreciated that I was upfront about things that others might not say, and my boss praised me for it. My learning curve at work was also pretty fast, and before I knew it, I was making a significantly higher salary than my previous job. The job was different from the physically demanding work I did before, so I didn't end up exhausted like before.
Everyone seems happy that work has gotten easier because of you. Thanks for everything you've suggested and done.
I'm glad if I could be of any help to everyone.
Your way of speaking and everything is just like your brother. That gentle vibe too. I'm really glad we hired you. Oh right. I want to entrust you with a new task today. Here, take a look at this.
There, a photo and name of a new product developed by a well-known company aiming for a big hit were written. It seems they want me to handle the advertising for this product. After that, I collaborated with the team to gather information and brainstormed about what would be good advertising for the target audience of this product, and how to promote it. I also made efforts to understand the client's farts by repeatedly asking them questions. Thanks to that, we were able to create an advertisement that perfectly matched the client's expectations, with few revisions and no last-minute rush. Of course, it wasn't just my effort as a newcomer. Everyone taught me how to improve, and they worked diligently on tasks and communication with the client, and with the help of the excellent technical team, we were able to create a very good advertisement. Mia was quite surprised by the results and praised me for a job well done. My former company forced me to quit my job unreasonably, but I was really glad that I changed jobs. Good companies attract good people. That's why I can work without having to deal with unreasonable things outside of work. Yet, there are young people who quit as soon as they face something unpleasant. Certainly, if you're being scolded for legitimate reasons in your work duties and find it hard to bear, then quitting might be the right choice. However, I don't think there's much reason to stay in a workplace where there are people who persistently harass others with unreasonable excuses. Unless there's a compelling reason, there's no need to endure such unjustifiable suffering. I changed my environment and found a workplace where I can better utilize my skills. And now I don't have to freak out about being harassed for unfair reasons. I deeply thought that the environment was important,